Have you ever wondered when is the best time to up out your plants? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to be telling you in today's video. I'm going to be telling you when is the best time to up out your plants, what signs to look for, and what happens when you don't. So let's go ahead and get started. When to up out your plants. And that is when your plant actually needs it. Not when you think it needs it, not because somebody told you it needs it, when your plant needs it. So what signs to look for in order to know when your plant actually needs to be potted? For me, normally, now, I've been doing this for a few years, and usually when you spend time with anything, whether that is plants or anything else in life, you usually tend to learn what you do every single day. So I can easily look at a plant, and just by looking at the plant, I can tell if the plant needs to be potted or not. But the sign number one is going to be water. So you have a plant in a container, and you've had it for a little while, so you know exactly how often it usually takes to dry between watering. Like this red Malaysian guava right here, or this Mexican guava right here. So these guys have been here for about a year and a half now. Last year, well, guavas in general, they dry very quickly. So these guys, you know, I kept them wet last summer. They were getting watered twice a day. But now, these guys are drying up a lot faster. So sign number one is if you had a plant for a little while and you know exactly how long it used to get water last season and now it's drying up a lot faster, a lot sooner than it used to, that is sign number one. And you need to pot your plant because the plant is telling you the container is full of roots and it's ready to go into the next size up. Sign number two is going to be once you start seeing roots coming down the bottom of the container, like this Tahitian pomelo right here, then your plant is ready to be potted. So this is going to happen with plants usually that have a deep root system or a taproot. The roots go straight down into the soil, and usually they will find any holes, anything to grow roots out of. And if you don't watch it, the roots are actually going to grow through the container into the soil. And that is sign number two to look for when to pot your plants. This citrus right here needs to be potted in a bigger container. Not only is it drying a lot more often than it used to, well, guess what? I'm also having roots growing down the bottom. And this is not the only one. The thing about plants is usually when you have the same type of plants together in the same area, same type, all the plants are gonna behave the same. So most of the citrus right here, as you can see, they got roots coming down the bottom because that's where most of the water is concentrating every time I water. And also, if you didn't know, every time that you water your plants in containers, a little bit of the potting mix will come out of those drainage holes. After a few hundred times of watering your plants, well, guess what? The bottom of your container or the soil or the area where you're keeping your plants, it's gonna start accumulating the potting mix on the bottom. As you can see, these are 3 pots right here, and I keep them in this 7-gallon containers just to keep them standing up. And the bottom of this container right here is full of soil on the bottom, simply because, well, they've been here for a while. These plants in here, they've been here for about 6 months, and look all the potting mix that actually has come out of these containers. And the roots are gonna follow moisture, and they're gonna follow the soil because they want to grow, they want to live. So that's another sign to look for when to pot your plants. So what's the next sign? Well, check this one out. So these are mulberry trees right here. And they look big, they look beautiful, massive leaves. They're growing amazingly, right? Because all the fish emulsion that I used on my plants. No, that's not it, guys. You know why they're growing vigorously? It's because these mulberry trees in here, they are in 15-gallon containers. And since they have been sitting in this area for now, I think about 2 years, they actually rooted themselves through the container into the soil. And just recently, I started cutting the roots out. As you can see, this root right here grew through the drainage hole out of this container. This is a 15-gallon, and it rooted itself through the wheat cloth. The wheat cloth that's supposed to stop the weeds from growing out of the ground and trees from growing into the ground. So, and that's the reason why these trees here are doing amazing. But as you can see, I didn't get all the roots there's another root right here that is actually growing into the soil, and that's the reason why this tree right here is doing amazing. And this is not just it. All these guys right here are rooted into the soil. So that's going to be one of the main issues that you are going to have, especially if you have plants that have a taproot system like mulberry trees. If you keep them in an area and you don't move them often, they will root themselves into the soil. You can see we got roots growing through the wheat cloth. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Well, check this out. These trees are growing great. They're growing big, and people like to buy big trees. So for me, it's not a big deal. But one of the things you are going to encounter with these plants right here, if you don't cut the roots, like this one over here, soon enough, the root system is gonna keep getting bigger. The tree on the top is gonna keep getting bigger. And then if somebody wants to buy the tree and you chop the roots, within a few minutes, all the leaves are going to wilt because the tree itself is no longer sustaining itself from the roots in the container. They're actually in the ground, and those roots are supporting that canopy. This is why when you go to a nursery and you buy a tree and they give it to you, it's wilted because they damage the root system somehow, especially a big tree. And mulberry trees, the only way to get them big like this in a container is for them to root themselves into the soil. I actually got another video where I explain this in details if you want to watch it. So those are the signs that I usually tell people all the time to look for before uppotting their plants, because putting your plant in a bigger container is not going to make it grow faster. I got a video explaining all about that if you want to check out the description. But anyways, yes, a bigger container is not going to make your plants grow faster. Usually, a bigger container is just going to allow the root system more space to actually grow out and prevent your plant from dying too quickly, especially if it's drying out too fast on you. And that's going to be one of the main issues that you're going to encounter if you do not uppot your plants soon enough. And that brings us to what happens to your plants if you don't uppot them. Are they going to die? How fast are they going to die? And what are some of the things that you can do to prevent that? So if you don't uppot your plants, what usually happens is two things. If the plant has a taproot system or a deep root system and it requires itself to be in the soil to grow, well, like figs, they will not grow. Or they're going to slow down drastically because they need the root space in order to grow. As you can see, I got tons of figs in here, and they are in 15-gallon containers. These figs are fully rooted in these containers, and there's just nothing else to do here because the next size up for me is a 25-gallon container, which is twice as big as these containers. That will take a lot more labor, a lot more space, and guess what? Figs grow too fast, and that container is just gonna do them good for another year. So what we do here usually is we root prune. Every winter we take the plants that are big in the container, we cut the roots, we chop the trees a little bit and put them back in the same container. And that's one way you can actually keep your plants long-term in the same container. But for other plants that have like a fibrous root system or any other type of root system, what usually happens when you do not uppot them soon enough, like this banana right here, they will dry very quickly. You will go from watering twice a day, 3 times a day, 4 times a day, and usually, I mean, unless you have your plants on automatic watering, there's just no possible way you're going to be able to keep up with the watering, especially in an area like mine in the desert where the temperatures are extreme every single day. So you're going to forget watering one day or one watering that one day, and then your plant is dead. And if it's not dead, the damage that is sustained just from wilting, from going dry just for a couple hours, will take months to over a year to recover from. So that's why you uppot your plants and you don't let them in that container for too long. So what happens when you uppot your plants too early? Well, the main thing that's going to happen is, no, your plant's not going to die. But remember, the soil around it, depending on the size of the new container, will stay wet. And then if you uppot your plant too late, like closer to winter, that will remain wet around the root ball of your plant, the trunk of your plant for the entire winter. Cold and wet do not mix. And that is usually how you overwater your plants and kill them, especially if you put them in a bigger container than they need to. Another thing that's going to happen with them is they are going to slow down. Most plants need to be fully rooted in their container before they actually grow up. That is true for, I would say, 90% of my inventory over here. This lemon eucalyptus are huge, you see, massive. These are a 5-gallon container right here. The reason they look massive is because they have been root bound for over a year. And most plants, usually when they become root bound, they grow fast. But that's a good thing and a bad thing, because now they're drying out very quickly. And if it wasn't for my automatic watering, these plants would have been dead, because they are drying out on me several times daily. So if you apply your plants too early, what's gonna happen is your plant's it's not gonna grow, because it's gonna concentrate on growing roots into the new container. And once it's actually fully rooted into the new container, then it's going to start growing. But if you appotted it too early, it's going to take longer for the plant to start growing. This is why when you appot your plants too early, you don't see any improvement. You don't see any growth at all. Your plant is just sitting there. Then you go online and you're like, my plant is not growing. I just bought it 7 hours and 36 minutes and 15 seconds ago. I put it in a bigger container, I gave it azomite and sulfur, and my plant is not growing. And then you get replies from all these master gardeners out there telling you you need to put it in an even bigger container, and the reason your plant is not growing is because you forgot the fish emulsion. Well, now you know the real answer, and that is your plant was just not ready to be potted into a bigger container. Depending on how fast your plant grows, it may take 6 months, it may take a year before you actually see any growth out of that plant after you potted it. So let's talk about potting your plants. So let's say you have an ice cream banana like this one right here. This is a 4-inch container, and this plant is fully rooted in this container, and it needs the root space in order to grow bigger. This is one of those plants that actually benefits from going into a bigger container. When they need to be potted, they will actually grow a bigger root ball, and the plant will actually grow bigger. Banana plants in general grow faster and bigger in the ground rather than containers. I always recommend people to put them in the ground. But if you don't have the choice of, if you don't have the option or the space to put them in the ground, you can go ahead and keep them in a container. So when potting your plants, you always go in increments. You don't go from a small plant like this into a huge container like this one right here. You see the size difference? That is too big. The main problem you're gonna have if you put your little banana like this into a huge container like this is most people do not realize the bottom of this container dries mainly through the root system of your plant. This root system right here. So if you put this little plant in that huge container right there, all this new potty mix right here will remain wet 24/7. It will not dry, because this plant right here, unless you're living in a tropical area where this plant grows like a weed, well, it's gonna take too long to actually grow roots all the way down the bottom of this container. Winter's gonna hit. This plant over here is being wet 24/7 the entire year, and guess what's gonna happen in the winter? Your plant's gonna die from rot. And that is how you overwater your plants. But remember, this will take a long time. But that's why I do not recommend potting your plants into a huge container thinking that it's going to make your plants grow faster. You always go in increments. So this is a 4-inch container right here. So the next size up would be a 1-gallon container like this one right here. This is a 1-gallon container. This is a 4-inch container. So you can see the size difference right there. That would be the ideal size to pot this plant. And then, depending on how fast the plant grows, in my area, this 1-gallon container will do this plant easily for about 6 months before it becomes root bound again. If you want to learn more about root bound plants, I have another video where I talk about all that in details if you want to watch it. Now let's go ahead and talk about when is the best time to pot your plants. Just like I said earlier, the best time to pot your plants, it's going to be when your plant actually needs to be potted. Now, there's a little disclaimer on this one. So let's say you have a tropical plant, a plant that will take frost damage or cold damage during the winter time. So obviously those guys, usually you want to wait until warmer temperatures to pot them, because you don't want to damage the plant. You don't want to stress the plant, because if it takes damage in the winter time from frost or cold, and then you pot it, you damage the root system, that may be all it takes to kill that plant. So for most of my tropical plants, or any plant that likes warm temperatures, I usually wait until spring to pot them. Now, I don't have a specific time to pot them. I'm lazy, so usually, I pot my plants when they need to be potted, and sometimes I wait too long. Sometimes it's going to be in the middle of the summer, sometimes it's going to be late summer. It doesn't really matter. But during the winter time, for those plants, I usually wait until warmer temperatures in the spring. Now, let's say you got figs, or you got mulberry trees, or plants that really don't care for the winter time. Those guys, actually, in my opinion, the best time to up-pot them is going to be during the winter time, because they go dormant. They drop their leaves, and they don't care what happens to them. You can just stomp on them, chop the root system, chop the tree. They will not react to that damage until they wake up. So the best time to up-pot those plants is usually during the winter time. Like these mulberries right here that rooted themselves into the soil, I'm not gonna mess with those. I'm just gonna cut the little roots off for the ones that are just got little roots. But for the ones that have thick roots, I'm just gonna let them be. And I'm gonna wait until they go dormant in the winter time, and then I'm gonna chop the roots, chop the canopy, and then repotting into the same container so that way I can sell them next year. These types of plants, best time to pot them is gonna be when they go dormant. Because if I do it right now, they're gonna wilt. They may die back a little bit, and nobody's gonna buy them that way. So I'm just gonna let them be like this. And don't worry about them until winter time. But if you just went to your favorite nursery and you got yourself a plant like this pineapple guava right here, 4-inch container, and you're wondering, do I need to pot it? Am I gonna kill my plant if I wait too long? No, everything in gardening takes forever, guys. So even if your plant is root bound, the only thing that will happen at the beginning is your plants will dry faster and you may need to water them more often. But the process of going, of being root bound and dying from being root bound takes a very long time. Like I said, I got a video talking about that in details, so you can go ahead and watch it if you want to. But this one right here, so let's say you just bought it from the nursery. Do you need to pot it? Well, just looking at the size of the plant, to me, this is very obvious that it needs to be in a bigger container because the plant itself is bigger than the container. You see? So you can go ahead and put this into the next size up, which this is a 4-inch. So the next one in general is gonna be a 1-gallon container, and then you are good to go, especially if you are just starting the growing season in your area. But let's say you have no clue. You just started gardening and you have no idea if you need to pot it or not. Just watch out for how often this plant is drying out on you. So let's say it's drying out on you once a day. That is normal. Most plants during the growing season in containers are going to dry daily, minimum, unless you live in an area with cooler temperatures. Because remember, plants sweat for the same reasons you do. So the hotter the temperatures, the more your plant's going to sweat, the faster they're going to dry. So this plant right here in my area, right now, it's drying out about 2 to 3 times a day. So this plant needs to be potted before it gets hotter in my area, because if I miss watering it, it's going to die in a matter of hours if I let it go dry. But yeah, so if you just got a plant from the nursery, just watch out for how often that plant is drying out on you. And then if it's usually more than, once a day, it's safe probably for you to pot it. And one way you can check is just check the weight of the plant. You can stick your finger in the potting mix and see if it's dry or wet. And that's 2 of the ways that you can actually use to check if your plant is dry or wet. If you have any questions, as always, comment below. If you haven't liked the video, what are you waiting for? And as always, I will see you next time.